Let me know. Chat. Are we live? I think we are live. You know the drill. Okay. Can you hit the one button? The one button. Let me know if you can hear your boy Trill Black loud and clear. In the chat there. And we will proceed. Sorry, I'm a bit late. 5 minutes. Nah, it's not that bad. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat, please. And we will proceed. I'm pretty sure you can hear me, but just in case. Let's have a look here. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay. Okay. What's going on? I don't want this. Move. Huh? Get out the way. Ooh, okay. Loud and clear, says London. Surfactant says warm. Dominic G says hearing you fine. Excuse me. Tut Ankara says yes. Love heart. Cameroon, Guinea, Sri Lanka. What's up? Okay, that's what's up. Sri Lanka in the chat. Okay, Baker Boy 3. We got black folk in Sri Lanka too. Everyone down there black. Arvin Porter, just a different shade. Kofi Brown, Trill is the truth. I am not the truth, but thank you. I appreciate it. He is the truth, the way and the life, said the Lord Jesus Christ. Right. Okay. Thank you very much for the compliments. So it's good to see you all here. Nzwana Mose. Nice to see you, brother or sister. Okay. Guys, family, you know what it is. We're here today because the brother King's Monologue, an independent content creator, independent because he's no strings attached. He gives you the honest truth about what he believes that the ancient Egyptians look like, the different contributions of blacks and Africans to world civilization, unlike any other content creator out there. And he is amazing with it. And he's joining me today. And he's joining me on a topic that is his expertise. His complete expertise. In fact, I've never seen anybody quite like the King's Monologue. I said last live or 2 lives ago, whenever it was, I said, some of you that I've spoken to in private, either via Instagram or Discord, I don't know how it's possible, still were asking me, oh, the King's Monologue, I've never heard that. Well, today you need to pattern up and sort it out, because if you're not subscribed to him already, please make sure you go and subscribe to him. Today we're going to be going through something that is his wheelhouse, his expertise, and we're going to be looking at reconstructions of historical figures, namely the ancient Egyptians, digital reconstructions. You see a lot of them these days. You see them on YouTube, you see them on Instagram, and particularly with the advent of AI, lots of people are making prompting. I'm not an expert with that as either, but people are putting their prompts and different prompts into AI, and they're coming up with all sorts of gibberish. Okay, we're seeing lots of these YouTube channels show up. Pharaohs, one of them chiefly that we'll be speaking about tonight. Amenhotep III. I saw one as a channel. I can't remember the name, and thank goodness I can't remember the name. But it's a popular channel by the subscriber count. Last I remembered, or last I viewed it, and it just had some like nondescript white guy donning a kepresh as Amenhotep III. Now, Amenhotep III is one of the blackest pharaohs in ancient Egyptian depiction. There's no ambivalence about Amenhotep III. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm gonna add the king to the live right now. I've introduced him enough if he even needed introduction, and he's gonna say hello, and I'm gonna go straight into the questions. There it goes. All right, King. Welcome.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I can hear you.
Fantastic. Thank you for that really kind introduction. It's always a pleasure to be on your channel. So I really appreciate the invitation. Yeah. Obviously, I'm a big fan of your channel as well. Fantastic channel. Can I just say this actually, whilst we're both, I'm not going to, obviously not trying to glaze or anything like that, but I just have to say the quality of your production and research seems to be on an exponential curve at the moment. Like they get just exponentially better each one. I don't know what it is you're doing, but keep up because your videos are fantastic. I love them.
Bro, do you know what? That is a glaze, but I'll take it.
But it's true. It's
I'll
honest.
take it anyway. Right, because I feel like, thank you, but I feel like it's rubbish. Every time I put out content, you put out something not so long after, or you're constantly putting out stuff anyway, and I look at your stuff and I think amazing. So it doesn't even compare. So thank you. That mutual glazing all around.
Yeah,
You
so
get
you're
like
glazing, and
okra.
I was
You get
being.
the
I feel
glazing. You
like I
get
was being quite honest with my compliment. There. You're just thoroughly.
No, thank
um,
you, bro. Thank you.
can
Thank
I just
you.
say as well, and I have to say this, make this clear. You described me as an expert earlier, and I
Yeah.
have to kind of correct you there. I
Okay,
have
go
to
on.
say that I'm not an expert in forensic facial reconstruction. I have to say I'm an enthusiast.
Okay.
Because we don't really want people bringing
Mm, mm,
our work into disrepute and
yeah.
saying that we're claiming to be things that we're not. So
Yeah.
I'd say I'm an enthusiast. I'd say I'm a strong enthusiast, and I can say that for someone who's not perhaps quote unquote qualified in the area to have written an academic paper and to have got good citations from
Mm,
PhDs,
mm,
that's a good sign. It means that
yeah.
I'm a credible enthusiast, but I'm an enthusiast nonetheless.
Yeah. Do you know
Yeah.
what? Well, that's right on schedule, because if you're not an expert, uh today we'll be looking at experts, or so-called experts, because I really hate to see what the actual experts are putting out. So if
Mm.
you're if you if you're just an enthusiast, bro, I think we need to change definitions. I really think we need to change definitions. So I'm going to um I'm going to say a quick shout out to Surfactant. Um, he says, let me just thank you very much for that super chat, Surfactant, for your $10 super chat. Two of my favorite pro black creators. Ladies and gentlemen, please support these men. Oh, thank you, man. I really appreciate that, bro. I really appreciate that. Thank you for that. Um,
And
let me
I like the fact he's described. Well, I don't know about yourself, but I like the fact he's described me as pro-black. I think that's probably the most apt description of what I do. If I'm going to be totally honest, I am a pro-black researcher. So,
mm,
yeah, I like that description.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Right. On your screens, you should see it nice and clearly. Um, well, I'm gonna just leave that up on the screen. You should all be able to see it. I won't say any more than that. And let me ask you, what's going on with my laptop? Come on, stop it, man. I need to see this. Right. I hope you can all see what's on the screen. Can you? Yeah. Press one if you can see the image on the screen. It's not showing it on mine.
I can see it fine.
Okay. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Okay. I'm just gonna leave that there whilst I ask you this to begin with. Family, here we go. Right. I was looking at your video titled Mainstream Egyptology Just Lost All Credibility. I believe that was
Mm.
streamed on in May last year, but it feels like yesterday because I remember actually watching it when it streamed. Um, you mentioned a few words in that live, okay?
Mm.
Dolichocephaly, and I had to go look up the meanings of these words. Um, so correct me if I'm saying them wrong. Maxillofacial extensions, zygomatic proportions, overjet, and overbite. How? Right. I went out and I did a quick deep dive into these words, and I thought, okay, cool, that's what they mean. Okay, interesting. I've got one question for you now to start this off. How
Go on.
should these, uh, what you might call anthropomorphic and craniometric variables, how should they affect digital reconstructions? How should they? I'll leave it to you now.
That's nice. You went straight in there. I love the fact that you just dove straight in with some heavy, technical jargon,
Start as with me
just
to
to
go on, bro.
scare off everybody who's listening. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's a very. Actually, I like the fact you started there. It's a really good question. So when it comes to, so let's talk about what's on the screen actually. So we're more specific about this. So to address the first term that you mentioned, it was dolichocephaly. Okay, and dolichocephaly is essentially an expression of long-headedness, for want of a better word, where essentially the head is longer than it is wide. Okay, and we're looking for a head that's notably longer than it is wide. In the Black community, we essentially call it a peanut head or hook head, or there's lots of different things that you might be called when you got this longish, narrowish head. And it's something that ancient Egyptian skulls are essentially renowned for. They don't all possess it, but it certainly is the vast majority when it comes to ancient Egyptian skulls. We know this because a study was done in the I want to say 80s. I think it was 80s, 85 by Raymond Dart. I could be wrong with that date, but I think it was the 80s by Raymond Dart, where he measured 2,761 skulls. And I think the rate of dolichocephaly was like well over 70%. And even the mesaticephalic skulls, which is kind of like, that's the middle. So you got dolichocephaly, then you got brachycephaly. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. And then in the middle, you got mesaticephalic skulls. And even those ones were more weighted towards the dolichocephaly. And I'm mesaticephalic, by the way. I'm not dolichocephalic myself. So what you have is a huge bias towards basically African rates of dolichocephaly, because only African populations will possess dolichocephaly at those rates. Seeing it's not that dolichocephaly doesn't appear in Europeans or Eurasians, but it's just that it doesn't appear anywhere near those rates. So when it does appear, it's relatively rare. Also, to put on top of that as well, the type of dolichocephaly expressed by the ancient Egyptians is specifically African. So we hear Carolyn Wilkinson speak about this when she's doing that video about Arsinoe. And by the way, I'm not talking about Arsinoe and Cleopatra. I'm just taking the quote that she said, because a lot of people will try and take you out of context when you quote people. And she was quite clear that the length of the head in comparison to the width and the low vault. So Africans, when they express dolichocephaly, it's not like a really tall head. It's a relatively low vault. And the reason the vault is low is because we have that extended, I'm going to use another technical term here, that's occipital, which is the back of the head. We have a kind of like a pokey out occipital region. So when we express dolichocephaly, it's got kind of like the back of our head pokes out. Whereas in amongst Eurasians, when they express dolichocephaly, they tend to have kind of like a pokey front of head, if that makes sense. And their head still looks kind of squarish, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So that's just to be clear. That's kind of no. Someone just said there's both mesocephalic and mesaticephalic as well. Mesocephalic tends to be used in animals. Just to correct martial mind bodybuilding. So mesocephalic tends to be used in animals, but mesaticephalic tends to be used when we're talking about humans. But I appreciate that.
See, and this is not an expert allegedly here that you're listening to, chap. This is allegedly not an expert. Thank you. Just carry on. Thank you for that martial mind bodybuilding. No shit. I'm just saying. As per King himself, he clearly knows his stuff. Let's just say that. But carry on, brother. Sorry.
Yeah. So when it comes to like I was saying, when it comes to the head shape of the ancient Egyptians, it falls right in line with African populations, particularly those African populations along the Nile. So you see it really strongly amongst groups like, Maasai, the Kalenjin, Yoruba have it as well in spades. I think at a rate that's very similar. Yoruba have it at about 72%, which actually shocked me because I was like, do we? But yeah, I guess we do. And yeah, the way we express it is exactly the same way that the ancient Egyptians express it. So there's a very it's like, logic points towards the ancient Egyptians, just like with every other aspect, just being a locally black population because they just have the the local traits that black populations do. And just to kind of like add on top of that as well, if you don't see these kind of rates in modern Egypt, and that's what the argument will be. They'll say, oh, we're the descendants, we have the genetics, but it's kind of like, but you're missing all of the anthropometrics. This is the problem. Do you know what I mean? Like you haven't got the head shape the Africans do. You haven't really got the bodily proportions the Africans do. So they're kind of just missing all of the things, the anthropometric things that would align their populations.
So I want to ask you, actually, just to prove I'm listening, you said, I reached my pen immediately. You said it. I am mesitocephalic. I said, oh, King has a mesitocephalic head. So I wrote that down for my notes. Something to blackmail him with later. No, I'm joking. But listen, I said, I wrote that down. And so for me, that raised eyebrows really, because I'm thinking, this doesn't mean that within black populations, if you were to go to a population that we know beforehand is actually an African population, and we examined and exhumed and examined their skeletal remains, and it doesn't mean that finding, because the way this has been positioned is that you have 40% non-dolichocephalic, so 40% of the population was non-dolichocephalic. It doesn't really mean that, does it, when you find another type of skull shape, in that it's more to do with the fact that it's just like if you went to a white sort of a graveyard, you knew that the population of the people that you were sampling or studying were white Caucasians, and you found here and there anomalies. it wouldn't then presuppose, or it wouldn't cause you to say, well, this is not this was not a European population. So am I right in assuming that? Because I think I've seen it where the way they do this study, and they only do it when it comes to African populations that are sitting supposedly on a civilization that others want to claim, they'll say, well, we found other skulls, so it must have been a mixed population. Why doesn't it work like that?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct there. And this is why, we, when we're talking about this, we deal with rates, because what you can't do is say, well, this is brachycephalic and therefore it's not African. No, Africans have brachycephals. And just like you said, we could flip it on its head. If we were in a European graveyard and we knew they were all white Europeans, we wouldn't say, oh, we found a dolichocephalic skull, it must be a black man. No, we wouldn't do that. We're looking at rates, we're looking at patterns, we're looking at averages, and this works across the board when it comes to anthropology. It could work the same way with if you're looking at paternal lineage markers. If you knew you wouldn't just assume because someone has an E marker, like that Johannes Krauss, that guy I can't stand, who hates black people, that geneticist, he has the most African E marker. He has like a sub-Saharan Y-DNA paternal lineage, which I think is hilarious. Probably one of the reasons he hates black people. But yeah, so he has black African Y-DNA according to these kind of like genetic hacks. Anyway, he has a black African Y-DNA lineage, but he's clearly a white man. So what you don't do is take kind of like single occurrences of things and then make broad sweeping statements. But when you've got a haul of skulls, such as 3,000 odd skulls, and they present to you all of the traits that you see in localized African populations, and none of, or very few of, the traits that you see in the other surrounding populations in the north, cough, cough, then you can make a fair assumption that these people broadly match these people. So that would be the right way I'd assume anthropologists would want to approach it. And just to also just jump on what Jonathan Waters has said in the chats, he said that they don't have genetics as smoke and mirrors, and I agree with that. I kind of threw out the genetic thing as a soundbite, but I agree with him. The way genetics is being manipulated at the moment is something that we need to get on top of. But I'm also very, very confident we will get on top of it as well.
Okay, thank you for that, King. I wanna circle back to the actual original question. So, if you're listening, these are terms that typically describe Black African populations. Just to summarize what the King's Monologue has said there, these are terms: dolichocephaly, maxillofacial extensions, zygomatic, overjet, and overbite. These terms typically follow Black African populations around anthropologically. So when you're doing a digital reconstruction of the ancient Egyptian or an ancient Egyptian pharaoh, or when others are doing these reconstructions, I asked initially, how should these terms that are typically aligned with African populations, how should they influence these reconstructions? Now, do they? So do they actually, in reality, when you look at the wide range of mainstream reconstructions, do they actually do these terms actually affect how these different so-called experts actually reconstruct the pharaohs and the queens and etc. In your opinion?
So yeah, that's another really good question, very broad. I kind of want to slow us down a little bit because we probably need to tackle all of those terms that you've given the audience.
Please feel free to.
Yeah, no problem. Just to kind of like walk through this and make it very clear. So I think you said maxillofacial. Did you say?
Yes, extensions. I don't know.
Extension. Okay, yeah. So, all right. So I'm going to talk about two things in that regard because the maxillo or the maxillary area is your upper jaw. So that's basically the area between the bottom of your nose and your lower jaw. So that's kind of your upper jaw area. So that's called the maxillary, and then your lower jaw is called the mandible. So if we're talking about facial extension, then really probably what we're talking about are two things. We're talking about prognathism, which I know you'll know what that means, and that's that kind of when the jaw protrudes ahead of your zygomatic, of your kind of like cheek area. So your jaw kind of like is forward in comparison to your cheek structure. That's a very, very African trait. Okay, so that's a very naturally African trait. A lot of African people will have it. Now, once again, it's not exclusive because Africans are so phenotypically diverse. We can be orthognathic, which is when you're essentially flat front of face, and we can be retrognathic, and that's where the jaw actually recedes. All of those are perfectly natural and normal expressions of phenotype in Africa. However, prognathism is very, once again, weighted towards the African community. It's rare to see it, or at least to see a strong application of prognathism outside of Africans. They will they will normally come up with some kind of disability, to explain away prognathism when it occurs outside of the African community. So we've got prognathism as one of the things that expresses itself. But then we've also got another trait, which is probably less spoken about, and that's that extended maxillary region. So essentially, that top lip region in Africans tends to be quite large. That's a common trait. Europeans can have really, really tiny maxillary regions. That is that kind of space between the bottom of their nose and their lower jaw can be really, really small, hence the tiny top lips. Whereas Africans would tend to have a more extended maxillary region. Now, once again, it's not exclusive because if you go to populations like Ethiopians in particular, in fact, very strongly in amongst the Habesha tend to have quite small maxillary regions. But I would say broadly speaking, a lot of Africans, most Africans have an extended maxillary region when you compare it to Eurasian populations. So that's kind of, hopefully, that does that explain that term, that maxillofacial.
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely does. Yes.
brilliant. And what are the other terms? What are
So
the other terms?
I brought up zygomatic proportions.
Okay, so zygomatic, that's your cheek area. Okay,
Mm.
and you kind of have that expresses itself in two ways. You've got two bones really. You've got the zygomatic major, which is the side of the side part, so the your cheek that faces outwards. Yeah. And then your zygomatic minor is your cheek that faces forward, i.e., faces in front of you. Yeah. The difference that you can find between Eurasian and once again African populations is that it's very common amongst Africans to have a rounded zygomatic minor. That is the front of face having a rounded or a convex appearance. This is what gives us that nature's collagen look. Okay,
Right,
we have
right.
that. Yeah. We have that natural. We're a naturally cheeky people. Okay, it's one of
Mm.
the things that keeps our faces looking young, and this is
Yeah.
why Eurasians tend to like their Botox injections,
Yes. Yes.
and they always look a bit weird. You can always tell when a Eurasian's had Botox because they don't naturally have that rounded front of face, that rounded zygomatic. If an African was to have Botox, you probably wouldn't notice because it's a very natural look for us to have a rounded zygomatic minor. So that's one of the things, and this is one. I bring this up actually in the. Have you seen that reconstruction that Elizabeth Darnes did of KV 35 younger lady as Nefertiti? So I'm not sure if you know what
No,
I'm talking about. Yes,
no, I've
that's
not.
the. If you was to Google that, I'll do a quick search. Just do KV 35 younger lady as Nefertiti reconstruction. You'll see when you see it, you'll remember it. It's that really butters one where she looks like I think I called her a a I can't remember, a budget Kardashian or something like that. I roasted it. It's just horrible, horrible, horrible reconstruction. They tried to make it like Nefertiti, but one of the reasons it looks
What's that
really
again?
weird,
KB35 younger lady.
younger
Okay, yeah,
lady, reconstruction. It should bring that up. It's like a
yeah.
Nefertiti. They tried to make her Nefertiti. By the way, KV35 younger lady isn't Nefertiti, but that's an aside. The point being is that KV35 younger lady has really pronounced zygomatic minor. That is the front area of the cheek, really rounded, very African cheeks. So when they try to make her look white, she just looks like a white woman with Botox. And that's why. Now you know why that's the case, because they don't understand or appreciate these kind of the phenotypic range of African/black people is just very broad in comparison to Europeans. And that's why it's really difficult to write black people out based on skull features. It can be very difficult because we express so many different phenotypes on the African continent.
I've just got it, and and yeah, I've seen it before. I know what
Yeah.
you're talking about now. Let me just um present it. This is ridiculous, man. This is absolutely ridiculous. The extent to which um okay, so I'll present screen. Okay, let's try that again. Come on, what are you talking about? It's there. Okay, my computer's deciding to be weird today. Right. I will look for that. I will look to try and get that up on screen, but I don't. I'll get it up later. I don't know why
Yeah,
it's
no worries.
around right now. But let me close a few things. Maybe that's why. Stop doing that. Ah. Okay. Close all windows and we'll start again. Present image file. And let us go. This is really important, guys. When you see this, I think it's fair enough that people should see it. There we go. There she is. There's KV35, the younger lady.
So
See,
this is actually a really good one to look at because it kind of expresses loads of the things that literally you just spoke about. So look at the maxilla region. Remember what I was telling you earlier about that extended region that black people have. So can you see how she looks really gaunt and gormless?
Yeah, it looks
Yeah,
bizarre.
yeah. She's kind of looks like, "Ooh, what's going on?" That's because she has a extended maxillary region, which is very normal for Africans because we'll fill up half of that space with what?
With cheek and lips.
Yeah, or with a very fleshy top lip.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? That's what half of that space is supposed to be taken up with a naturally voluminous top
Okay, I
lip.
see. I see.
Yeah. So this is why she just looks kind of like, ooh, looks really long. And then, like I said, you can have a look at the cheeks. You could see they've tried to smooth them down, but you can't hide how pronounced that, her zygomatic region is. She has, high pronounced cheekbones, which is a very regional African trait. So essentially, yeah, when you take an African skull and you try and plaster, I'm going to say white features on top of it, this is what you get. You just get something that doesn't look like it ever was a real human being,
It
That's it.
literally does look like someone. It looks like the ancient Egyptians were into Botox. It's just
Yeah.
it's a stupid face. It's an absolutely stupid face. But and this is the thing again. It's the only doctrine, academic discipline, Egyptology, whatever you want to call it, that consistently cuts its nose to spite its face, because a lot could make sense. A lot could make sense otherwise if you just admitted the bleeding obvious. These people were black people, for goodness sake. It's like, my goodness, how, to what extent will these people go to just it's yeah, she looks absolutely like a freak of nature.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. I totally agree with you. I think I always mention Nydia Senegal. She did a reconstruction of KV 35 younger lady that was a lot nicer. I'll try and find it before the end of the stream. But yeah, it was much nicer because she just kind of like respected what she saw. And yeah, like you said, I think even the way you described it as cutting off your nose to spite your face, I think that's such an apt description because it's literally doing everything other than what's logical. And this is what we have to kind of put up with. It's just doing everything other than what's logical. It's like close our eyes, shout la 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 la, and pretend that we can't see the people of Aswan right over there,
Yeah, yeah.
whose skulls look exactly like this skull we got in our hand. Let's do everything other than just admit the fact that these people are black, and that's
Let's now do overjet and overbite. What are those terms?
okay. So overjet and overbite, you might as well just call these East African teeth.
Right.
Yeah, you might as well just call it East African teeth. So this is so overjet is when your top row of teeth kind of angle in front of your bottom row of teeth. So they push ahead. So basically when you smile, your top teeth, in fact mine do that as well, my teeth overjet. Your top teeth are in front of your bottom teeth. I guess everyone's teeth does that, but when it's done at an acute angle, it's called overjet. Okay. And then overbite is when your top teeth go over, as in over and downwards over your lower jaw. So it's kind of like so your bite is your teeth kind of coming together, but an overbite is when the top row of teeth are over your bottom row of teeth, basically.
Right.
So combined overjet and overbite kind of just give you what people kind of maybe say is kind of like buck teeth, so to speak. And once again, it's not always something that is an apparent kind of like physical problem. In fact, a majority of black people are overjet, a majority, but we have large teeth, I would say large lips or thick and full lips to compensate for the fact that we're overjet. it's a dominant trait in black people to be overjet. It's not a it's not a big deal. It's just a part of our facial makeup, so to speak. So yeah.
I see. So okay, we've got these terms now. Again, going back to that question I asked you earlier, are these these technical terms that describe black physiognomy, are they followed as a rule when people are trying to generally reconstruct these faces? And yeah, just yeah, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean there won't be, because they're not exclusively black traits, to be clear about that. Yeah.
Mm,
You have to treat it like, when, like I said, always when you have that approach where you're going to say, I've seen this and this means the person is black, I think
right.
that's risky. Do you understand what I mean?
Okay.
We kind of like, you can't do that. What you have to do is take a measured approach and then start to deal with probabilities. Okay. And
Right.
probabilities will get you much closer um, to the truth and away from kind of any emotional position. So this is kind of what I tried to do when I did that documentary. A lot of people do this approach of, what race were the ancient Egyptians? I think it's a stupid question, if I'm going to be totally honest with you, because you're talking about a civilization that spans several thousands of years, with several scores of ethnicities along the gnomes. At least that's what I believe. I believe you had loads of different ethnicities, but all of these ethnicities were native African ethnicities. Okay, native black, but they were different. There were different ethnicities and different groupings of people along the Nile over a long period of time. So we would have had loads and loads of kind of like, movement, change, change of leadership, change of demographic. And broadly speaking, yes, we know the ancient Egyptians were black, but it's a very broad and kind of unsatisfactory question, which is why I prefer to say, okay, let's take one ancient Egyptian that we all know, who was a king, like Tutankhamun, yeah, and let's look at all of the evidence. Okay, let's look at all the evidence that we've got. We've got craniometric evidence, in terms of, the shape of his skull, which is, unequivocally African. Okay, cool. So that maybe gives him an 85% chance of being African. Okay, let's also look at, his dental makeup. He's got overjet, he's got overbite, he's got typical East African teeth. Okay, then let's add another 60% to that 90 something percent that we already have. Let's also look at his genetic data, his results that clustered him as being, 94%, probability of being a match to Great Lakes Africans. Okay, now putting these ratios alongside each other, it's getting a bit ridiculous. Let's look at the anthropometric proportions that he presents us with. Okay, he has super negroid limb proportions. In fact, he sits right in the middle of the negroid ratio, or the negro ratio, as it was quoted by Robbins. He sits right in the middle of it, in that you can calculate his limb proportions perfectly using the negro equation. So he sits right in the middle of that. Okay, so he's got negroid limbs, negroid skull, negroid genetics. At this point, you kind of go, okay, can we at least say that this was a black boy? Is that fair?
Mm.
That to me seems more reasonable. Okay, we might not come to an agreement about the entire civilization, because you're very stubborn people, we know that. But can we at least put the argument about Tutankhamun's race to bed and say he's definitely a black boy based on all of the data that we have? Can we do that? I think we have enough data to do that.
So, okay. The one I've got here isn't Tutankhamun. It's Amenhotep the Third, supposedly,
Yeah.
and it's the one by, I believe, a Brazilian individual. This time we'll use the word expert. We'll use it in air quotes, but it's by a Brazilian expert known as Cesare Moraes. Now he claims that this is the face of Amenhotep the Third. So, chat, you can look up on the screen. I believe everyone can see that. Now, I'm going to show you some comments, and they're from the most opinionated group of people, probably in the UK, anywhere in the UK. Okay, and these are their reactions to this Cicero Morias's work. Let me see if I can get that up on the screen quickly, if I can. And tell me if you can guess. Let's play a game actually. Let's see if we can guess where I've sourced these comments from. Try not to look at. Well, I might have given it away on the screen. There might be a thing there, but anyway, let me just show. Yeah, I'll probably give it away by some of the fonting and stuff. All right. So okay. First comment on the screen there. Let me know if you can see it. You should be able to see it. It says he looks embarrassed. That's what Radaman says. He looks like the fat one from Abbott and Costello, says Eilina. You've got someone say, oh, let me go back a bit. Wait, Shrek is a pharaoh. Someone says, guess who more? Like, I think they're referring to that game. I don't know, King, if you remember that game we used to play at school on Mufti Days. Yeah, guess who?
All rainy days.
Yeah, exactly. Rainy days in primary school and secondary school. Yeah, I think that's what they're referring to. Someone says he drinks in my local, calls himself Bob. Then you got, I'm pretty sure it did not look like a cartoon. That's a fair enough comment. We've had it, just says that's not him. Why does he look like your British uncle called Bob who likes a bit on the horses? And they just go on. Looks nothing like him, not as I remember anyway. Looks like a Family Guy cartoon. Surely there's better technology out there than this. And there we go. So I'll just go back to the image that they're all referring to, and it's this image. Now, King, can you guess what website that is?
What, where they were all cussing him?
Yeah.
No idea. I have no idea.
The Daily Mail. It's the Daily Mail. It's none other than Daily Mail. And you know what? Fair play to them, because they are normally now if the Daily Mail is saying something looks too white in terms of ancient Egyptian reconstruction, you know you messed up. Do you think they're harsh, bro? Or I mean,
do you think they're harsh? I don't think they're harsh at all. I don't think they're harsh. The funny thing is, so obviously you kind of been following, you've watched a few of my videos, so you know that me and this reconstruction artist are in kind of direct contact. I actually believe that he made this reconstruction in response to the reconstruction that I did of Amenhotep III before him, because he has a habit of releasing reconstructions very soon after I've done them. And then when he appeared on all of my live streams, and I think I did about 5 live streams on this subject, ending with the one where the couple where I actually released and read through my paper, he was present for most of them, maybe all of them. I think someone in my admin or one of my moderators blocked him.
Wow. Oh, that makes sense, because when I went on that live and I'm watching that live back, I can't see the comments. You keep referencing him, but obviously when you block someone in the live,
their comments disappear.
Yeah, you don't see their comments at all post back. Right.
So I told my guys not to block him. I kind of know why they did, because he was being very annoying, but at the same time, I didn't want them to block him. Oh, so Factor said Macy did it, which is a possibility. Well, I'm not gonna have a go at them, because they did the right thing, and perhaps I should have been more explicit about not blocking him. But anyway, so he was in there, and me and him have had quite extensive back and forths, and everything that they've said, I've probably said to him or about this reconstruction. It's a horrible reconstruction. Let's be honest with you. You know, it's absolutely horrendous. It pays no respect whatsoever. It's actually disrespectful, if I'm going to be quite frank. It's a disrespectful reconstruction. It's disrespectful to the artwork. It's something that you'd never see this in any. This is akin to taking a photograph of Queen Elizabeth, a young Queen Elizabeth, and then going and getting a woman from South Sudan, you know, or someone from the Omo tribe or a Yoruba woman, and doing a reconstruction and saying, yeah, this is what Queen Elizabeth II actually looked like. You know, it's a joke. You know, it's actually insulting. Um, and the fact that he'll get this published even in paper, so you can say, oh yeah, I rate Daily Mail, but the fact of the matter is, in order to get this out, I know him and his Egyptologist, you know, Michael Havoc, they just basically do press releases, you know, and just kind of like send these out to all the media outlets. But it's up to the media outlets to actually, you know, present these to the
Mm.
world. Now, in fairness to them, they trust, and this is one of the reasons why I wrote the paper. When they get these kind of studies or press releases from people like Cicero, and it's been co-signed by an Egyptologist, they think it's credible. Do you understand what I mean? That's what gives them, oh well, it's been signed off by the academy, you know, so therefore it must be good to go, and then they publish it. You know, they don't understand the amount of trickery, deceit, and you know crap that went into the production of this reconstruction. But luckily, I like to think that I was able to uncover most of the falsification tactics that he used to get to this kind of final product in my paper. If you haven't read it, yeah.
I've not read it. If you can, please send it to me. I will have a read of it. But you did a good job in that live in itself.
Mm.
And then you did a few good follow ups. That I did start to watch. Now, you go into a lot of detail. He says, I don't know if it's him actually. It might not be him. So let's play devil's advocate here. Let's try and be fair. Somebody claims that he was bald. I'm in Amenhotep the third. They claim he was fat and that he was, I think, toothless or something. He had very bad dental hygiene. I mean, I should imagine all of us in 2, 3, 5,000 years would have would have bad dental hygiene. But yeah. So is this correct?
No.
Is really what I want to know. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing that irritates me. So if you pull up that first image that you had up that shows the skull from the front and the side
Okay, one second.
of Amenhotep III, what you'll see is that Amenhotep III has had it's clearly nothing to do with dental hygiene because he has an actual hole in the front of his face, okay, where you can see someone posthumously, obviously, has basically just taken a hammer to his front teeth. Now, this has had the double effect of A, getting rid of all of that overjet and overbite that we speak about, okay? And B, kind of reducing the look of his prognathism. So you can see that in there. Just look at the side view and the front view. Can you see that big hole at the front of his teeth? That's not bad dental hygiene. That happened. That didn't happen during his life. That happened afterwards. Someone's gone at that mummy with a hammer. You know. So for them to declare that he had bad dental hygiene is absolutely ridiculous. You can also see that the lower jaw has been jutted back slightly. It should be slightly forward from where it is. And even that image is being tilted. So I actually corrected this image when before I did my reconstruction to give a good look at what his skull should look like. I could share it actually if you wanted me to.
Yeah, why not? Definitely. So when it comes, you know how it works. When it comes, I'll just present it.
Yeah, I'll let you. So let me show.
Whilst you're doing that, that makes perfect sense, chat. Because a lot of the time, they they readily admit. When I say they, I mean the quote unquote experts in this field who constantly feed us the propaganda, the whatnot. Uh, they're constantly telling us, this person had some kind of accident in their life and everything. But at the same time, they readily admit, if you go back on a Wikipedia page, just a cursory look into the history of excavations in Egypt, the breadth of vandalism that took place originally when they were digging up a lot of these mummies is unbelievable. I mean, the original Egyptologists just put dynamites, just blew up whole complexes of these tombs.
Yeah.
So how they can admit that, uh, and on the other side of their mouth, claim that, I don't know what the excuse would be for, okay, bad dental hygiene. And we've actually, this might sound like a conspiracy theory, unproven, but it's go back on, the king has, in a few of his shorts, he's shown, he's documented statues arriving in pristine condition at the British Museum. I did a live on this maybe a couple of months back.
Yeah.
Where the statue arrives at the British Museum in pristine condition, and a few, not even years later, the nose is knocked off. So this idea that it was ancient iconoclasm is a lie, is a complete lie.
Yeah.
They've been caught doing that. So anyway, go on. Sorry. Have
No,
you?
it's fine. It's fine. I think it's certainly the iconoclasm thing has certainly been oversold, even if it did occur. I'm on the fence at the moment in regards to if it occurred at all. So I'm not. I know for a fact that European destruction happened, and I know for a fact that some of the destruction would have been done by the Greek Orthodoxy. Might have done some of it. The Coptic Orthodoxy did quite a bit of destruction themselves. And I know that the Muslims would have done destruction, but that wouldn't have been targeted towards features. They didn't really care because they didn't really associate themselves with that civilization. But at least everything within me is, and all the research that I've been uncovering is leading me to believe that a vast majority was done by Europeans and modern Egyptians. They've kind of taken over in the last 40 years. But prior to that, I think it was exclusively, I think it was 150 years of Europeans just going gung-ho. And I think the iconoclasm thing is a total fabrication. And one of the reasons why I lean towards that is because they've done the same thing with European art, as you've seen when I showed people kind of like the artworks at the Vatican. They they have all had their noses changed. So this isn't something that they've isolated to ancient Egypt. They've done it everywhere. The only reason people think that Hellenic art, Roman and Greco-Roman artwork hasn't been touched is because they haven't looked close enough. If you look closely, all of them have had their noses changed. The Roman nose is an invention. It's not a reality.
Wow. I saw something you did on that a few months ago, actually. So yeah, that live completely stunned me, and I think we were talking privately, and you showed me that first, and I had a cognitive dissonance moment where I didn't want to believe it because I thought, come on, these things are in. But once I saw it, I couldn't stop seeing it. I actually can't stop seeing it now. That's the first thing I do now when I see these statues in museums. I look close and I see the noses. I see where the nose has been removed. I see either a thin fissure that's been gone over with some kind of material, or I see, I just see it now. So Facton, thank you very much for this $5 super chat. You say, this is why I call them Piltdown, man. They just make up everything. Thank you for that. Marshall Mind Bodybuilding, thank you, bro, for your £2 super chat. You say some looked like a fulanoid coisonoid mix. Yeah. If you're referring to the ancient Egyptian faces that we see in the archaeological record, in the statues and the wall arts, I agree with you there. But thank you again for that donation. Carry on, King.
No problem. And I kind of just that's kind of like modern day Rwandans have that fulanoid coisonoid mix. So I agree with that. Can I just address one of the comments from Marshall Mind Bodybuilding as well, because he put a question up there for me, and he said, question for TKM: are the Nubian caricatures they like to show actually genuine artifacts or fakes, because if you go to the Sudan, the Kushite murals look just like the Cometian ones, phenotype wise. And I think that's a really good question, because that's a good point. And as only as he said it, it kind of like, I was like, that's true. I do agree. And this is where we get into that world of how much do we trust what things have been labeled as, and what, because we always take it for granted that the labels that we've been given by Egyptology are correct. So one of the ones that that I push back up against quite heavily is when they call people Nubian. And I'm like, no, Nubians didn't exist back then. And it's so important that we stress that, because this Nubian supergroup that they've created contains people who were Egyptian, in particular the first nome, which is Tar Seti. And Tar Seti is the first nome of Kemet. It was a part of ancient Egypt. And everybody and every occurrence and every instance of Tar Seti in Egyptology has been reclassified as Nubian. This is something we need to push back against. And then you have the term Nehesi, which tended to mean Kushite or Ethiopian, okay, in ancient Egypt. The actual closest translation to Nehesi is copper. So I believe that's where, I believe they call them the copper people. But I think there's a lot of debates and discussions about what Nehesi means. But Nehes in ancient Egyptian meant copper. So to me, it makes sense that the Nehesu were the copper people. But anyway, we can go into that. But addressing what martial mind bodybuilding is saying here, it's very possible that the people who, because I wouldn't call them caricatures, because these people do exist in south of Sudan. We have the Newer people, we have some of the Dinka people, but it could just be a case that they represented people who were further afield. In fact, some of them sometimes they could have been depictions of Libyans and people from the Western Desert. Sometimes they could have been pictures of Mauritanians. Some of them could have been pictures of bloody people who were in Nigeria at that time. You just don't know, because so much of it we just take for granted that Egyptology's labeling system, which was basically everyone black was Kushite or Nubian, everyone black, like they didn't care, everyone black was Kushite, is ridiculous. And just to kind of like compound that as well, a friend of mine who comes on your channel quite a lot, you know Wesker Willie?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he's my guy. But he sent me something this morning which just kind of like hit a light bulb for me, and it was like a mural of these people who were clearly dressed in Minoan garbs, but they were all black, jet black. And he was like, these are probably Minoans, and I was like, these are definitely Minoans, you know. But in our mind, we've been taught that Minoans were white. But if you look at all the existing Minoan murals that haven't been tampered, they always show black people. The only ones that show kind of like these pale red people are complete fabrications. They're not the originals. So it's kind of like they've really done a work on ancient artifacts, and we're going to have to, after we're done with Egypt, we're going to have to go through all of the ancient civilizations, doing a similar cleanup job. Because people think that it's just Egypt. It's like, it's really not. And this is what people don't get who come to my channel. It's really not just about Egypt. Egypt is literally just the first step in rebuilding a history, global history, that has literally been whitewashed and removed.
Wow. This is a rabbit hole. This is a rabbit hole that I've been trying to avoid for the longest, because there's already so much work to be done. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I got nothing to say on that. I've seen the Minoans, and there's definitely something going on with them. Even with the standard image that you get of them, you'd be hard pressed to say these are just your average modern day Greeks today. These people, there's something going on. And then when you read the ancient record, I did a video not long ago, and in the course of researching that video, I came across the ancient Roman sources talking about the people of Sardinia, the Aboriginal people of Sardinia as Black Africans, Ethiopians. And I'm thinking to myself, what? Like, what? But then I'm slapping myself as well. I'm thinking, this is what you do, bro. This is what you do. Why are you surprised? You know?
Absolutely.
Anyway, go
So
ahead. Tell us
oh, let
about
me
what we're seeing.
yes, let me get to the image now. Sorry, there's a lot of talking. So getting onto this image. So this is a just a rebuilt um, Amenhotep III skull, and it's explained in the paper. But I had to do a few kind of fixes to what Cicero did in his reconstruction. So he did a few things. The first thing he did, and you can do the comparison if you want to the skull that he shows. But the first thing he did is he made the mandible, which is the lower jaw, he just made it smaller. I don't know why. He just reduced its size or he jutted it backwards. But can you see how now it looks slightly retrographic, i.e., it looks like it's pushed back? Can you see that? That's
Yeah.
deliberate. He's done that deliberately because that's a kind of like more common European phenotypic trait as opposed to having it
Right.
level. He also, and he says it in his paper, made no effort or attempt whatsoever to rebuild the front teeth that were missing. He left them out because then that presents the teeth as flat. And you can see on my one, I built them back to show the kind of like overjet, overbite, and that kind of maxillary tilt, which
Hold the
is,
presses. Hold the presses. So what you're
yeah,
saying here, the image on the left hand side
yeah,
is his attempts to reconstruct the so-called bad dental hygiene,
yeah,
and what he's done in doing that is he's flattened it.
yeah. Or he's just kind of like ignored. In fact, his looks is funny. His teeth look flatter than the teeth than the skull with missing teeth. How I don't know
Right,
how
right,
that's
right,
possible.
right,
You
right.
understand what I mean? Like
Yeah.
so he's just got done a whole job there in
So you can
basically
see the
hiding.
trajectory. You can see the
Mm,
trajectory that the mandible is going in, and
mm,
he just ignores that and he flattens it. Wow, wow.
exactly, and he can kind of like essentially no one's got to check him on that because that's the one thing in Egyptology is you can whiten as much as you want and you won't get any pushback. Now the other thing that's very notable, and this is the most notable, is I want you to take a look at the spinal column, the way he's presented the spinal column.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you see how it kind of like curves outwards towards the back of the neck? Yeah. So
Yes,
the
I can
center
see
of
that.
your spinal column is kind of like the center of your inner ear. That's kind of where it would start. Okay. And can you see how it kind of like curves outwards?
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is unnatural and doesn't happen in any human being. Okay. The spinal column convexes. Okay. In other words, it curves towards more towards the front of your throat. So it should
Mm.
go in a kind of a C shape, not a D shape like he's got it here. Now, you might think, well, that's a little bit thingy. Why are you even mentioning that? He's done that deliberately because he wanted the spine to be closer to the back of the head. What is he trying to hide? Let me ask you
The
that question.
dolichocephaly.
Exactly.
I can see that.
Exactly. He's trying to hide the dolichocephaly. So by moving the spine back, and I mean, he's moved the spine back here about 2 inches from where it should be. Ridiculous. Yeah. Because he wants to hide the fact that Amenhotep III, like all Africans, had a rounded bean head at the back.
Wow.
He didn't want that to show. So he's pushed the spine back as close as he can, and then he can kind of present it like this flat back head European, because this is what we're used to seeing with Eurasians, this flat back of the head. Now you can see from that skull that Amenhotep III did not have a flat back of head. You can see that he had a rounded, peanutty shaped African back of head. But he didn't want that presented in his reconstruction, which is why he opted for that. So there's a lot of trickery that went on in terms of how he presented, well, basically how he moved and manipulated the features so that it would present as a more Eurasian face, because he knew there was kind of protocols that he had to meet doing the reconstruction, and he knew he couldn't meet them with the African skulls, so he had to do a little bit of contorting, a little bit of twisting, a little bit of pulling here and there, and then he could put his European meat bag over the top and hope for the best.
I'm speechless. It's not that I'm haven't got questions to follow up, but right now I'm speechless. That's amazing. And this is your paper.
Yeah. So I called him out on all that, and actually I kind of showed how basically he has let me show you. Actually, there's a part where I kind of exposed that he has multiple skulls that are completely different, multiple different skulls, some European, some African, and they all approximate to roughly the same face, which kind of invalidates his entire premise. Okay, by the way, this is a great paper visually as well. So if you want to kind of see nice collages of what Amenhotep III actually presented as, you can kind of see that all there.
This is on your new website, isn't it?
Yeah, this is on the website, but it's the same paper. So this is that image you had earlier alongside other Amenhotep III artwork, and then that's a man from afar, and that's my reconstruction. And you can see just how naturally they all sync.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not much. You know, there's not much stretching or kind of like of the imagination you have to do to get there. This kind of just shows the different phenotypes that you can see present. These are all Rwandans, by the way, but I won't go into that right now. But let me just quickly show you what I want to show you regarding how he's kind of like approximating the same thing over and over again. So here it is. This is what, no. So this is the original skull. So you can see it. Okay.
Yep.
And it's not closed. So when I did mine, I had to close the mouth. But you can see how he's just basically made the jaw smaller. He just ignored it. You can see it's visibly smaller here on his one. You can see the lower jaw. Just made it smaller so he can make it look retrographic and finish it
And he
before.
closed it.
Yeah, and he made no attempt to build back where the front of the teeth had been knocked out. Okay. And you can see the spine, what it's doing naturally. Okay. It's doing that kind of like C shape as it should be naturally doing, giving you that nice protruding back of head, which he entirely got rid of. And then I show you, this is my one built back, and you can see how I've just followed the natural contours to show you exactly what the skull should have looked like when it was built back. Now, let me quickly show you. Sorry, do you want me to go back?
No, I'm just saying, of course. I can see
Yeah,
that when you show me your version, it makes far, like, I challenge anybody. I challenge any neutral. Forget the people in the chat right now saying, yeah. Like, not forget the people in the chat, but if you're in the chat and you're neutral, I challenge you to not to say, look, the King's Monologues version as he's showing us on that page just now doesn't make more sense. I challenge, I really do. Anyway, carry on, King.
I appreciate that. And I just want to quickly show you. Yeah, so he did the same thing with KV55, another skull with a quite strong rear protrusion, quite a low vault, quite a long skull. And you can just see it doesn't even look like the same skull by the time he's done with it. He's tilted it. Yeah. And you can just see the way he's done that once again to introduce retrographic, to reduce, KV55 is a very prognathic skull. Okay, very prognathic in that the lower jaw protrudes quite far forward when it's rendered properly and when it's oriented properly. And you can see he's managed to get rid of all of that and make it retrographic. So this is and I just did this to prove that he does this all the time. It's not like he's doing it once. He does it with every reconstruction. So he knows exactly what he's doing to manipulate and get the outcome that he's after. Once again, he's desperate to hide that rear protrusion of the skull, which is such a big tell that you're dealing with an African skull. But this was it. So this is what I wanted to show you. So over here, if you have a look, these are 4 different reconstructions that you can find. These are all done by Cesare Marias. Yeah, 4 reconstructions based on 4 different skulls. Yeah, so have a look at this guy here: A, B, C, and D. Yeah, just ignore the skulls and look at the heads and the faces. Yeah, as much as you can. And would you say those all look really similar?
Yeah, ish.
Yeah, they all look like fat white men. Can we at least agree with that? Yeah. And they all kind of have similar flat back of skull. Yeah, agree?
Yeah, they do.
That, yeah, all present as brachycephalic, all quite heavily set, all got an unnatural amount of fat on the back of their neck, I would say. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, let's look at the source material for these, okay? So, the first one, this one, was Tutankhamun's skull. This one over here.
B. That would be B.
Yeah,
Chat. It
so
would have
B
chicken itself.
is Tutankhamun's skull, which presented like this. C was a completely different European skull. So look at the difference in the skull shapes. This is Tutankhamun's skull, strong bean head. Agree? Yeah. Now look at this skull. This is like a more typically Eurasian skull, really round. Can you see the difference between Eurasian skulls and African skulls? Yeah, really round presenting. Yet look how are the faces. Would you say these heads are different enough considering how different the skulls are?
Yeah. I mean,
And then
I'm looking at. I'm
yeah,
looking at. Um, C would match. Um, C would easily match. F.
but then if C matches F, how does B match E? It's my point. Can you see what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
at what
That's
point?
it. So B is meant to be Queen Tut, right?
Yeah, so B and E is supposed to be King Two. This is supposed to be tucked down here. E.
So that's E is Mariah's work.
Yeah, it's all Maurice's work on here. Yeah, it's all down here. And then finally, this is Amenhotep again. Yeah, and this is G. So look at E, F, and G. To me, they all look really, really
They're the
similar.
same. They're the same. He's just
Exactly.
copying and pasting.
Exactly. But if you look at the skulls, they're three completely different skulls. So if this process of facial reconstruction had any validity, you'd have three completely different faces down here, wouldn't you? But he's just come ending up with the same face every
Oh my
time,
goodness.
regardless of what shape the skull is. He's just ending up with the same face. It's like just a plastic. Yeah, it's just like, like I said, he just gets this big European meat bag and shoves it on top of the skull, regardless. How
It's
can
a wrap.
Tutankhamun's skull approximate to a similar face as this one? These are two. I don't think you could find two more divergent skulls than these two, B and C.
Oh my! Someone in the chat says, "Bro looks like Kurt Angle." It's just, I love you guys. That's the Iron Sheik. This is incredible. I just can't believe what I'm seeing. It took me a while to catch up. He's just literally. It's the same person for different individuals over and over again. He's not even
A,
tried.
E, F, and G. A, E, F, and G is all his work, all based on completely different skulls.
Oh my word!
And in there, you got Tutankhamun's skull, which should be one of the easiest skulls to make a different face from. And you just, yeah, you know.
This is, but I mean, okay. So look, King, I read his just as on a side note, like you can miss this if you want to, or just do a political answer or whatever. But I did read his response to you. I sped read it, and one
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
things he was talking about was, well, why would I just to crudely paraphrase in case he's listening? I am crudely paraphrasing. It's not your word for word, but one of the things he said was, why would I be disinclined to show them as black? I have a black father. Essentially, I'm not racist. My best friend is black. Kind of an argument. He said his father. He showed a picture of his father, and he said he was in in the past in Brazil. His father would have been classed as a black man. He looked indigenous to me more, but whatever. And then he also did this ridiculous thing whereby, again, this is all within the same sort of effort to show that he has no sort of racial bias. But he also he zoomed in on the skin color of his presentation, and it was the oddest bit of gaslighting I've ever seen in my life. He zoomed in on a bit of coloration on his reconstruction, and he zoomed in on a very specific part of your hand, that of a picture that you use on your thumbnails, and he compared it to, and he said they're actually the same skin color. And
Yeah.
I was like, what? I don't know what you have to say to that. It's just
This
bizarre.
this this was my response to that. I'll let you read between the lines.
Unbelievable.
So this was my direct response to that.
Yeah, good one. Chat, if you chat can see that. And if you can't see this, just in case for any reason you can't see this, say you've downloaded this and you'll listen to it on a walk or something. it's the king's response was to show a black guy and a white guy taking a selfie together, and he zoomed in on a shadowy part of the white guy's face, Caucasian guy's face, and zoomed in on a particular niche section on the black guy's face. And the black guy's face is the bit that the king is zoomed in on is lighter than the bit that he zoomed in on respectively with the white guy. So it's a game you can play with anything, and it's a game our friend I don't want to mention his name, or the guy who looks like the fellow out of Lord of the Rings, Wormtongue. It's a game that it's a game
Your
that he
favorite guy.
yeah, it's a game that he likes to play as well. This game with Photoshop and color tones. Wow, yeah, that this is a brilliant response. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you
Wow.
can't, just like you said, you can't go back and forth with arguments that stupid. You know, you got to be like, okay, I'm not gonna say, you know, come on. This is the only way I could respond to that. Do you know what I mean? It's like that the game we're playing now, find the lightest pixel or the darkest point and say that my reconstruction. He actually said his reconstruction, word for word, he said that his reconstruction was darker than me.
Wow.
You still see, he had a picture of me on his response, and he said, "Look, my reconstruction is more dark skinned than you." I was like, "What?" I was like, "What?"
I mean,
You know,
at
that
this
was,
stage, you kind of think, are we actually dealing with human beings, or are we dealing with bots or some kind of AI trolls? I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know. Okay, so I've noticed something when you have these papers. One of the things that you did in your live on this topic was also to go into genetics, and in one of the papers on genetics, I think it was a Dr. Habish or something.
Habig,
That
yeah, Michael Habig, that's the guy he always works with. Go on.
right. I quickly read up on his paper that I didn't read the full thing, but his paper that you were citing in that live, and it was filled with words like, actually no, I didn't read his paper. I read I read an article that was citing his comments on the reconstruction of Mr. Moraes, and his comments were laced with words like may have and perhaps and believe. Have you noticed that they use like these uncertain indicators, and it almost, when the so-called experts do it, it infers credibility where there is none. If anyone else was saying maybe and perhaps and think and we believe, it would just be like, well, that means nothing. That literally means you know nothing about the topic. But if you know, I picked up on that. I don't know if you noticed that, trawling
Yeah.
through paper after paper, we miss it a lot, but they use these on these I don't know what the grammatic term would be for these words that just signify
Yeah.
uncertainty.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, well, look, it's entirely that's the academic process, to be clear. When I did my first draft of this paper, for instance, and I sent it, I actually had you had Dr. Onyekanubia on your channel, didn't you?
Yes, a
He
few
marked
weeks.
my paper for me. So I didn't
Wow.
mention before, but since he came on your channel, that means he's like, when to come. He was the one that marked this paper for me, which I was very grateful, because it was over 15,000 words, and he marked it in detail. He's a genuine, proper guy, and I really, really respect and love him for that. But when I first wrote it, I was using very strong absolute language, and he put red lines through all of it, and he said, you can't talk like that when you're doing academic papers. You can't. So you have to talk with uncertainties. The good thing is because in science, obviously, you have to approach it objectively and know that everything that you present is a theory and is only correct until it's been disproven. So the good thing about that is, though, when they speak like that, it should fill you with confidence that you're able to refute them. Nothing that's produced in the academic world is irrefutable, and they don't present it as irrefutable. So all you have to do is present a sound, cogent, supported argument, which you're very capable of doing, by the way, Mr. Chill Black. And there's no reason why basically what you present won't be taken seriously. Like I said, it's been to my surprise, I can tell you, I've had one museum curator. I've had a couple of PhDs, and all give citations. So I've had about 4 or 5 citations, and then I've had at least a dozen other PhDs in Egyptology view the paper, maybe without leaving comments, but I know they've read it. So, you know, you can get different perspectives and, you know, refutations to even the cabal of Egyptology. You can still get your stuff out there and present it in a way that, I mean, the whole reason I did this paper was so people had something that was readable and referenceable. Now, obviously, you know that I'm building on this now to put this information into a book and make it even more accessible. But that's the reason I did it. And that's sorry, I know I went around the houses, but that's the reason why I think that uncertain language is used, is because it kind of has to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I want to share something on the screen and ask you a question about it. Um, Here we go. Right. So up on the screen there is, I believe, Amenhotep the third. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think I
Correct.
am.
Yeah.
And if you carry on, I believe that is at the British Museum, and it's supposedly Amenhotep the third as well.
You know, a funny story about that one that you just had
Yep.
on the screen, that used to be labeled as Footmost the Third
Okay.
when the British Museum first took it. So about 100 years ago, this was hanging in the British Museum as Footmost the Third. I'm still looking into it. He's got Amenhotep the Third's eyes, no doubt, because I noticed these little traits because the artwork is very consistent. And I'm kind of doing comparison work. I am leaning towards it being Amenhotep the Third, but I thought I'd just share that with you.
Okay. Thank you. Then you've got, again, I believe I saw this labeled in some sections of the internet and on some displays as Amenhotep III, but they have some places settled for noble in his court. But that's supposedly Amenhotep III.
I'll tell you what the plaque says exactly if you want, because it's actually in the Louvre, and I took a picture of the plaque, I think.
And what does the plaque say?
I'm just gonna dig it up now, see if I can find it really quickly.
So this picture, as the King's monologue has just said, is this particular bust you can find at the Louvre in France.
Yeah.
Yeah, RJ Mackenzie says, "Look at those juicy lips." That's true. That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
But of course, they're not juicy lips. He was just obese, apparently. I'm going to move to the next. Oh, no. Let's go back.
Oh man, I'm just pulled it up on my screen. I didn't take a picture of the plaque, but I swear I'm about 80% sure it said Amenhotep III.
I'm pretty sure it did, because I found it labeled as such as well. So I'm pretty sure you're right on that. And yeah, so we'll go with that for now. That's the third image of Amenhotep III. Now I want you to see if you can spot the difference as these images are going up. I want you to let me know if you can spot the difference with this. Is okay. This is Amenhotep III. Supposedly, you find this at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, as well. So there you go. That's supposedly Amenhotep III. I don't know how correct that is, because they, as the King has just alluded to, they do change their mind every few decades or so. But it's supposedly Amenhotep III. Again, pay attention to the full lips, the particularly Africoid nose or broad nose of all 4 images up until now. And now we come to this image, which is supposedly Amenhotep III as well. Now, I want you to pay close attention and see it, people, if you can see anything untoward here. I've got one more image to share. If you can spot it, that's fine. If you can't, that's okay. On to the next image. It's supposedly Amenhotep III as well in the British Museum. So, King, over to you. Chat. Let me see if chat understand what I'm trying to get at here. See, is there anything that you can find? I'm zooming in deliberately. Is there anything you can find odd about the last two statues? This is the last
Go
statue.
back because I'm seeing something on that one, and if my hunch is right based on what you just zoomed in on, I'm gonna be shooting down to the British Museum this week to double check. Oh my gosh, you see now you're showing me something that I didn't see before.
Oh wow, wow. Okay. Because I
So
learned this. I learned this from you. I learned to be this attentive from you.
yeah, I
So if
didn't
you're
know.
if you're saying you're seeing it now, I'll be so proud of myself. Anyway, chat. Can you see it?
I need to go and have a look now. Now you've got my
Can
spidey
you can
senses
you see
tingling.
on these last two statues? Going back to what the king has said. So the yes, the RJ Mackenzie, the nose was broader than the latter images, right? The first four images definitely broad. Now, what got me thinking about these last two images, a representative of was why they were so different. That was the first thing to me. I thought, why the nose is so different on the supposed images, even the profile image to begin with. Even that was looked like if you showed a 3D image of that first wall relief, it looked like it would match the very broad noses we saw in the next 2, 3, 4 images. And then you come to number 5 and number 6, and they're thinner. But then you look closely. Remember what the king was saying earlier about noses being tampered with and then reconstructed. Have a look at this nose. King, do you see it? Can you enlighten us, please, with your conclusions?
See, the thing is, and here's the weird thing, yeah. On both of those statues, I never had any suspicion before you just raised this because I just can't see past those very African face.
Mm,
I just can't see past it. Like to me, I see a teen Amenhotep here, and I see a late teens, early 20s Amenhotep in the other one that you just shown. And he's always had this thing where the nose looks kind of a bit narrow at the bridge, but then kind of sweeps out and is a bit broader towards the base. And perfectly African nose, I'm absolutely fine with it. But this little close up you've got me here has got me wondering. So I would like to see.
let me tell you
In
why.
person.
Let me tell you why it's
Um,
hard, particularly on this image to see. I think in certain angles, not this angle, but in certain angles, I've seen this. Let me show you the angle I'm talking about. From this angle, especially with the lips, the lips are a-okay, and especially from this angle, the nose looks all right. There's nothing wrong. It looks like, again, we're not a monolith in terms of phenotypic properties. So you will still get this nose type, but
yeah,
I
absolutely.
think, and here's my theory. I think the original nose on this statue was so broad that this
Mm,
was the best job they could do with it. So
very
even in tampering with it, excuse me, sorry. Even in tampering with it, you still have. Just go back here. Sorry. Even in tampering with it, you still have a relatively African nose. But when you
mm,
zoom closer, you see around the nose bit, you see, first of all, the coloration changes. When you get to that nose bit, you see the color. And that is exactly what you
mm,
showed me, the kind of markers, indicators to look for when we're looking at potentially tampered iconography that's been tampered with. You can see that there. I can't unsee that.
yeah,
There's something that's been done to that nose to make the coloration all of a sudden lighter around the nose area. And then you
yeah,
see, certainly with this presentation of him, you can easily see where the fracture is on that nose ridge. Now, I don't
yeah.
know if they've just stuck the original nose back on. Fine if
I
they
can, I
have.
can actually see from this image here. I can actually see the outline. I can see the outline where they've just given the nose the tip a bit more point. Because I did always think that this one looked just a little bit odd. Just looked a little bit. And
Mm,
if you just flatten that nose just a tiny bit more, then not that it is controversial, but then it becomes indisputably African, if that makes sense. But
Yes.
with just that little bit of a point to the tip, which they are renowned for adding, it just throws that degree of ambiguity to it. So
Yes.
yeah, I see what you're seeing.
And
Well, hey,
and
this is around the corner. Me and you can go see this tomorrow if you want.
oh,
This is in
mate,
the
is that
hood,
an
man.
invitation? I would, yeah, but not tomorrow.
This
Maybe
is in
not
the hood.
tomorrow,
Well, I
but
can't do tomorrow.
definitely.
I want a live stream tomorrow. But yeah, but this is up the road, man. We definitely could link up and go and do some primary research if you want.
But yeah, so I mean, again, I once once you started talking about the tampering that's tampering with of these statues, that's when I started looking closer. And when you start looking closer, you start
Mm,
noticing anomalies like that. So
mm,
that potentially could explain why you've got statues that look one way, um and then you get these other statues. And again, notice that the statues with the broad noses and whatnot, they don't, the ones that they allow to stay intact anyway, um, they don't show any of these cracks or any sort of lines of potential modification. But these ones that just veer away from the typical, I don't know. I don't know.
mm.
Something's certainly going on. But
Take a
yeah,
look.
I'd love to see you do a video on that if you research that closer.
I mean, the funny thing is, if I'm gonna give you an honest answer, this statue in particular looks really similar, even nose wise,
Mm,
to his steles. So you know, like the side view
yeah.
papyrus artwork. This looks like the same nose to me, but I still, now you have planted that seed of doubt. Yeah, so I still want to see if
No,
it
but
has,
that's
if
the
there's been
thing.
some tampering there.
I think that's the best job they could do with it. I really think that's
Yeah,
what.
yeah,
Even
yeah,
looking at this now from this angle, I can't help but see the lightness. Excuse me, the
yeah,
lightness in the middle there on his nose compared to the rest of the thing. But again, I just think that's because that's the best job they could do with that particular statue. I've got
yeah,
this woman on the screen because I wanted to ask you about her. She's Gay Robbins, of Robbins and Shoots fame. They wrote
yeah.
the paper in 1983, I believe, paper, which is titled "The Physical Proportions and Living of sorry, the Physical Proportions and Living Structure
Statues.
of New Kingdom Pharaohs." Now, are um, how do I want to say this? Do you use her paper when you're doing your reconstructions? Did you use her paper, and what does she say about the bodies of the pharaohs?
Okay, so to be clear, I didn't use her paper to do the reconstructions, but I used the paper to gather anthropometric and anthropological data that helps to inform my decision making. So she has a 1983 and a 1986 study
Right.
done on New Kingdom pharaohs exclusively. So not random Pharaohs, yeah, actual pharaohs of the New Kingdom, where she's looking essentially at the limb proportions. So this is kind of like getting an understanding, or at least, yeah, basically that whole difference between tropical, or at least that's what Dr. Shamaka Cater calls it, tropical limb proportions, which she calls negroid limb proportions, and cold adapted limb proportions, which she calls white limb proportions. And there are very distinctive differences, once again, between native Africans. And once again, we're looking at ratios amongst the population as opposed to isolated individuals, but ratios amongst the population versus, Africans versus, let's say, white as a comparator. So these differences are that basically Africans have longer distal segments. The distal segments are the extremities that are the bones that are furthest away from the center of the body. So arms, the tibia bones, that's kind of like your shin bone area.
Yeah.
And so our those parts of us are longer which is why we have skinny calves. Okay. And why we have a advantageous reach. You know, if you get two boxes that are the same height and the same weight, one's white and one's black, who's going to have the longer reach? That's
Of
the
course, the
question.
black guy.
The black guy, always. Normally about 3 or 4 inches. Okay. And
I
that's
noticed that from boxing. I actually noticed that when
yeah.
I started watching boxing.
Yeah, that's almost that. I wouldn't say it's 100% of the time, but I would say 99.9% of the time, black people will have a reach advantage. That's a clear difference in anthropometric proportions. We also have a shorter torso. That's African body proportions. Europeans tend to have longer torsos and shorter distal segments, which is why they have naturally bigger calves, okay, and kind of like shorter kind of arms. That's the natural differences. And then Asians are even further extremities. So when it comes to like Far East Asians, they have even shorter distal segments and even longer torsos. Something that's the kind of like Denisovan contribution. But anyway, we won't go into what causes it. Well, basically, long and short of it is ancient Egyptian pharaohs fall into the Negroid limb proportions. Okay, Amenhotep III and Tutankhamun happen to be two that perfectly, not like almost marginally, but I mean perfectly fall on the line of best fit for Negroid limb proportions. In other words, if you saw them and they were in front of you, their bodies would present as the bodies of native Africans.
And that's what this paper from Dr. Gay Robbins, I believe she's still with us. That's what this paper in 1983 and again another one in 1986 essentially went on to say is that the mummies examined of ancient Egyptian pharaohs presented particularly Negroid features. In fact, I think a quote from it is I did a video and I think you've talked about it before. The quote was super Negroid. And also she said, I'm quoting now, their physical proportions were more like modern modern Negroes than those of modern whites with hard with limbs that were relatively long compared with the trunk and distal segments by uh, that were long compared with the proximal segments, end quote. But that's a long way of saying essentially what you've just said. So do you think let me just ask you, do you know what pharaohs were actually used in that study? But the skeletons of which pharaohs were used in that study?
Yeah. Do you want to read them out?
Yeah, go on, please.
Amos, Amenhotep the first, Thutmose the first, Thutmose the second, Thutmose the third, Amenhotep the second, Thutmose the fourth, Amenhotep the third, Smenkare, Tutankhamun, Seti the first, Ramesses the second, Meneptah, Seti the second, and Siptah.
Wow, that's a who's who.
Well, it's the New Kingdom. Yeah, it's the male New Kingdom lineage there, essentially.
Wow. And that's and on studying those mummies, she literally said the word super negroid. That's incredible. So Amenhotep the third is in that. Do you think Mr. Moraes knew of that paper?
He didn't, but when I did the paper, you know, he has a second response. So he has a response that you read, which was to my live streams. He then wrote a response to my paper. And to explain his response, can I just share my screen quickly again?
Yes, please. Let me I'll take this off.
Okay, present again, sorry. Share screen. This is just to kind of explain his response. Okay, so tell me when it's on the screen.
Yep, it's on now. I'm going to share it.
Okay, brilliant. I'm going to zoom here. So this is my paper again. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Whoops, what happened? Okay, I think that's as close as I can get.
Cool.
So if you have a look along the black dots along the top, that's kind of like the line of best fit for the Negro equation. Yeah. A3 over here is Amenhotep III, and you can see he literally sits on top of it. Yeah. Can you do me a favor and just hide Darth Skywalker's comment for a second as well?
I will do.
Thank you. Okay, so just look at the distance between where Amenhotep III sits in relation to the black line of best fit and where the white line of best fit is here. So you
Yes,
can see
yes.
the difference
That's
there. Yeah,
A3 there, yeah.
that's night and day. You can clearly see this dude is a black. Remember, this is a line of best fit, so it's an average. So your range really it's going to be kind of a range window that kind of like reaches from here to here. So all of these pharaohs fall comfortably inside the black range. Yeah. Tutankhamun is over here. No, over here. TU. Okay. Now you might think, oh well, there's a little bit of distance. Well, this very paper uses the Negro equation to calculate King Tutankhamun's height, and it uses three different bones. So it looks at his femur, his tibia, and his humerus. Okay, so it looks at three different bones, and all three bones bring back exactly the same height. Now, the only way you could look at three different bones and bring back exactly the same height is if you were spot on with your ratio. If they'd used the white ratio or the white equation, it would have brought back three completely different bone lengths. So three completely different heights. So they know for a fact. Now, what Cesaro Marias did is not willing to take the L, as these guys tend to be the case. He was like, because they didn't all fall perfectly on the Negro equation, which is a ridiculous thing to expect because it's the line of best fit. You know what I mean? Like people, it means we have people kind of above it and below it, but we'd say all the people that fall in this range were definitely black. But because they didn't fall all, and bear in mind, this line, this Negro line, was made from black Americans. Yeah. So it wasn't even made from like a local population, a local black population. It was made from black Americans. And it was still 10 times closer than, trying to put any Eurasian next to it. Yeah. Because it didn't fall perfectly on it, he created a new line, which he called the Egyptian line. Yeah. This is what they do. And he moved it like 5% away from the black line and said, "Oh, this is." I was like, "Dude, you're not even."
So he's taking the line a bit lower,
Yeah,
closer to the white
yeah, and
line.
said, "This is the Egyptian line." I was like, "This is what you're doing is ridiculous," because you're not even an anthropologist at this point. This is where I can come for you because at the end of the day, I have to be measured when I'm coming into your world. Yeah. But when it comes to you now trying to step into anthropology, and are you trying to turn around and say, Dr. Gate, you know more about anthropology or anthropometrics than Dr. Gay Robbins? Do you know what I mean? I was like, I'm not even going to pay any attention to this because this is absolutely just you just coping with the fact that I've destroyed you with this paper. And you're just coping now. So I just literally totally, laughed then. But look, there it is. That's in black and white.
This is what I mean by it's almost like we're dealing with some trolling sort of AI with some of these people, because I've not used it, but I've got friends, I've got people who from time to time will dabble with asking ChatGPT questions, and because the AI is only as good as the people that's programmed it or fed it its parameters, it will spew out some of the most bizarre responses in relation to patently black history, and try to problematize and make ambiguous things that belong to blacks historically, and talk about how other groups had this and that contribution, and try to play up their role. It's almost as, but what so let me circle back. So one thing that people that dabble with ChatGPT will say is that sometimes they have it's like it's got skin in the game, and they have to push it before it comes out with the truth, before it actually shows the proper sources. And I found this. Somebody once said to me, oh, I went looking on ChatGPT for some of the sources that you cited, and it said they were a lie, until I pushed it, and it actually gave me eventually the source that you had cited. So it was there, but ChatGPT was actually trying actively to like suppress them. This is exactly the kind of what you just mentioned just now, about literally him changing the parameters of something that he has no business doing. This is like an AI troll, a bot. This is this person real?
I don't know. I don't know.
Unbelievable.
It was. But in fairness, I think just like everybody who thinks they could just kind of like come waltzing into this space, and I think people come into this space and they just assume that we quote unquote Afrocentrists, even though I don't call myself that, but we black scholars or black researchers or whatever you want to call us, we're just going to be a pushover. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh,
Mm.
well, we're just going to come in there and show them what for. And I think at least one of the things they're realizing is that no, you can't do that. You better come with evidence. You better come with receipts, and you better come with strong arguments, because clearly it's not difficult for us to win this debate because we're not lying. Do you understand what I mean? When you're armed with this really useful thing called the truth and evidence, it becomes really. That's why we never get in a fluster when your favorite guy releases a new video or this, that, and the other. And like, never get in a fluster. I just go, oh, what's he banging on about now? Okay, let me look at his source. And but lo and behold, his source will always debunk him more than I will even need to. Do you understand what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you have to lie when you're when you're trying to support a position. You have to lie. You don't have a choice. Do you understand what I mean? You have to turn around and be like, oh well, I found this study and it said that all the artwork gets darker. And then it's like, well, no, your study doesn't say the artwork gets darker, mate. Yeah. Did you read the paper before
Mm.
you went out there? But you have no choice, because all you can do is lie, because anthropology won't support you. And here's the funny thing. Even now, I was just literally watching a Smash Rockwell video when I was shooting home to join this live stream to not miss it. And Smash Rockwell has this really good compilation of Egyptologists back to back, just basically all saying the ancient Egyptians were black. The ancient Egyptians were black. So now it's not just anthropology. You have to understand. They have to understand that they are now in the fringe.
Mm.
Yeah, we're actually Black Egypt is actually what it is. It's a I'm going to use the word gagged, but it's a muffled mainstream narrative. That's what it is at the moment. I.e., Egyptology, academia, no, they can't really argue with Black Egypt. Do you understand what I mean? So they've kind of Egyptology, the academic side, they've already kind of relented, and they're kind of like, yeah, the ancient Egyptians were, yeah, they were black. It's definitely they were black, but at the moment they are being muffled and they're being silenced because Egyptian antiquities, Zahi Hawass, your favorite guy, is will blacklist you. He will ban you. He will stop you from doing digs. He will literally end your career. As an Egyptologist, you rely on access to Egypt, don't you? Do you know what I mean? And if
Yeah.
there's one guy out there who is going to destroy your career if you say anything about the ancient Egyptians being black, it's kind of like that's how they are keeping academia, on a leash at the moment. That's kind of what's being done.
And they've actually, this isn't a conspiracy theory. They've done it. When the Dutch Museum a few years back decided to show the pharaohs as they should be shown in
Mm,
reconstructions as black folk, they literally didn't. They banned a whole academic institution, a whole museum. They banned,
mm,
and they claimed they were Afrocentrists. So, and I know people who've come on the channel before. I know academics who have told me that, literally told me, like, yeah, you can use some of my work, but don't say, don't use that, and don't use that because I might get banned from I might literally my privilege, my access to the tombs could be removed. I've had academics speak to me and say, I've had people say to me, um, I don't want to give any clues. So I'll just leave it at people, um, who in this space, with credentials. I know you don't. Nobody knows them. Um, who said to me, I would have loved to come on your show, but I've had too much flack before for saying the truth how it is. These are white academics now. These are white professionals,
yeah,
and I've had too much flack, and it's really not worth it. So I've moved on to other things. Now, you
that's
can't
sad.
blame. It's incredibly sad. It's incredibly sad. So, and you know what? I I have to say this now quickly. I'm getting to the point where doing this, I'm not. When I first started this, it was a bit like I had this kind of chip on my shoulder, whereas I kind of felt like I had to defend looking into Black history. Like when I
Mm,
told people that, oh, I've got a YouTube channel that looks into Black history, I kind of felt like, oh, be careful, that could be seen as militant or whatever. Now I
yeah.
just don't care. Now I actually just don't care. Now I'm so angry. I, I really am. I'm almost hoping for someone to say, "Oh, are you one of those lefty wokers?" And I just will tell them very clearly. You have no idea. You have no idea the damage you and your type and your type of thinking have done to a
Mm,
whole the global majority's history. You have no idea. So listen, it's really getting on my nerves because to the point where white academics are saying, I really don't want to be involved anymore because there's there's this cabal that just
mm,
doesn't like it. Why is that? Chat, ask
mm.
yourself why. And if you're neutral in the chat, why is that? Well, even if whatever side of the debate you fall onto, why are white academics having to say, I believe with you that they were blacks in by and large for the majority of the period that we know as ancient Egypt, whatever that means. But it's too controversial. Why should that be? You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. I just want to
Well, I
read out
guess
this.
the
Go
additional
on.
question you could put on top of that is I say that's sad, but then at the same time, I'm like, and this is talking about a bigger moral issue. I'm not going to go into it, so please move on straight after I make this point. But I just guess that racism is one of those things that doesn't get solved until white people take ownership of it. I always say that. It's a white mental health problem, and so black people are never going to be the result, also going to be the cure to racism. Do you understand what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like you can't cure someone else's mental health issue. Yeah, it's not a problem for blacks to cure. There's nothing that black people can ever do to cure racism. And I would say, in that same breath, when it comes to this, Egyptological person who doesn't want to speak out because of the flack, it's like, on the one hand, I do feel sorry for them, and I'm like, that's sad that they don't do it. But on the other hand, I'm like, how do you ever expect this to correct itself if you, as a white academic, aren't willing to challenge that? You are the most powerful um, toolbox to stop that kind of ignorance. Me personally, I don't give two craps what fragile white males think. I don't give a crap. They're always trolling my channel. Do you think I give? I couldn't care less. Do you know what I mean? Like, in fact, when see them getting butthurt and leaving comments, I love it. Like, it's like fuel for me. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh,
Hmm.
they really hate that. I'm gonna double down on that next time I do a video. Like, but I don't expect to stop them. I don't expect me coming out with the truth to silence them. The only person that can do that, the only people that can do that are honest and integral white academics.
Yeah, 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 definitely.
That's just my point
Definitely.
of view. Yeah.
Crenshaw Grinder, thank you for your $10 super chat donation. DNA consultants confirm the results. DNA consultants confirm the results. I wonder what specific you're speaking about. You might be speaking about what I've got on the screen. DNA tribes. And in your live on this topic, you brought in DNA, and you said a few things about DNA. You talk about haplotypes or haplogroups. Now, can you explain the difference just briefly? Give us like a Reader's Digest of haplogroups and SDR markers and mitochondrial DNA. Which of the three are most useful um, when we're looking to, do a reconstruction of what the ancient Egyptians might have, well, the pharaohs might have looked like, and which are most often used by the mainstream, Egyptologists and reconstructionists.
Yeah. Yeah. So my kind of perspective is this, obviously just based on the research that I've done. First of all, so like you said, you've got the kind of SNP markers, the ones that are most often cited and used in, I'm not going to even say by academics, mostly kind of like by internet
Yeah.
internet kind of like wannabe geneticists, are to use the uniparental markers. That's kind of like your Y DNA or your mitochondrial DNA lineage. And these are kind of, this is like single line ancestry. So it gives you a single lineage, you know, down, and leads to a single ancestor down the paternal line, i.e., father to father to father to father, or the maternal line, mitochondrial DNA, which is mother to mother to mother to mother. But everything else in the middle gets missed out. So it's not useful for understanding someone's biology. Perfect example of the fact that we had a discussion at the very start of the stream about the fact that one of the most racially disruptive geneticists out there at the moment, Johannes Kraus, has got Y-DNA lineage that matches most Nigerians. Yeah. So not useful for understanding someone's race at all. Yeah. However, it can be when analyzed with correct anthropological data, which is something that these geneticists like to miss out. It can be useful for kind of understanding how people moved historically. And I think nothing more than that. In terms of understanding one's biology, you have to look at autosomal DNA, that is the entire DNA lineage, and kind of see where that clusters you. And I think personally that you can't get a more useful tool for clustering people in populations than using STR databases, or STR profiling. And that's what was used by DNA tribes with the New Kingdom lineage. That was New Kingdom lineage data that was published by Hawass in 2008. They took the data that Hawass published, they ran it through their own STR database, and it was their own one. And they found that the New Kingdom lineage DNA clustered incontrovertibly close to Great Lakes Africans, followed by Southern Africans, followed by West Africans, followed by and by the way, those top three groups were substantially, by several factors, like closer than the next group, which was Horn of Africa. I know that might surprise some people, but this is what their DNA said. So the order was Great Lakes Africa, South Africa, West Africa, Horn of Africa, and then North Africa after that, and then obviously the other places, which were just tiny trace probabilities. So the one you got on the screen at the moment, this is Cater's one. This isn't DNA Tribes data. This is
Okay.
Cater's data.
Okay.
Cater and Jordan did run this one. Looks at the data a little bit differently, but still, broadly speaking, gives us similar results, which is putting all of the New Kingdom lineage much closer with, he used the term sub-Saharan Africans, but he did that as a direct refutation of, because this was done in 2018 and it was done directly to refute Johannes Kraus, that idiot I was mentioned earlier, his 2017 paper, the Kraus and Schienemann paper, which basically took the Phaeomite mummies and then tried to say that they were more closely related to Eurasians than anybody, and that the ancient Egyptians were essentially white and Arab. And so he came up with this paper and said, well, not according to this DNA of the pharaohs, which says that they were definitely several times closer to, well, have the probability of being several times closer to quote unquote sub-Saharan Africans than to Eurasians.
Right. Um. So essentially, the haplogroups don't help so much as the, what did you call it, SMP markers?
So SMP is the kind of like the single nucleotide polymorphisms. That's the well, in this case that will be the Y DNA and the mitochondrial DNA. You have SNPs and autosomal data as well, but we don't have that in this case. In this case, we have the STR markers,
Right, right,
which are
right, right.
different to SNP markers. Yeah, so we have the STR markers for the autosomal data, which is what this was produced from.
Right. And you say in court, I think if I remember correctly in your life, they don't use haplogroups for anything useful. In court, you're more likely to have STR markers used.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much exclusively. I mean, um, the single line ancestry, i.e., the Y-DNA and the mitochondrial DNA lineage, is useful, not for finding out if someone is a descendant because they're just too broad and too common, but they can be a good way of ruling something out. So, for
Right.
instance, if you got let's say you got the mummy of Tutankhamun, and then you got the mummy, you presume that this mummy might be the mummy of Akhenaten. Well, a quick easy check you could do is to see if they have the same Y-DNA lineage, because they're supposed to be father and son. If they have
Right.
different Y-DNA lineage, then we quickly can rule out the fact that they're father and son without even having to do any autosomal DNA.
So, um, which is more popular than when we get these exposés every so often, these genetic exposés into which ethnicity the Egyptians cluster uh, most likely with. Which sorry, let me start that again. Which
Well,
is more
let me answer, because I know where you're going with this. Let
yeah,
me answer. They do not touch. Let me tell you what right now what they don't touch. They avoid pharaonic DNA as much as possible. Yeah.
right,
They like to cherry pick tombs which they know will have ambiguous contents. Yeah. They like to cherry pick around tombs with ambiguous contents. They avoid pharaonic DNA. When they have pharaonic DNA, they avoid um, STR databases and avoid STR profiling like the plague. They won't go anywhere near it because they know what it's going to give back. They also, and this will be a surprise to some, they also avoid Y-DNA lineages as much as possible. That's the paternal lineages. They tend to avoid that because they know that ancient Egypt was a bit of a kind of like a bit of a concubine paradise. Yeah.
mm,
So,
mm,
in terms of mitochondrial DNA, you're more likely to throw up stuff closer or more ambiguous markers on the maternal line than you are on the paternal line, which seems to always come back really African. In other words, like Ramesses III came back with that kind of like marker, which they classify with West Africa. I'm not going to say I classify a marker geolocationally, because I think they've been very deceptive with that. But he came back with that kind of like E1 B1A, which is associated with most West Africa, well, with a large proportion of people kind of like in the kind of like West Africa region, and they didn't like that, so they avoid Y-DNA like the plague. So there's a lot that they avoid. What you find they do is every time they come out of a new study, they'll find someone more obscure than the last set of people that they tested, a bunch of nameless mummies or cadavers that they've plucked out of the sand somewhere in some remote desert that they'll now classify is a part of Egypt, and they'll do the kind of tests that they hope will bring back as much or as stuff they can classify as Eurasian as much as possible.
wow. I've got on the screen a super chat from Nerd Large, and it's the best comment I'm reading all night. Sorry, everyone else. Black Egypt undermines one of the core tenets of white supremacy, that the so called Negro race is without history and did not contribute significantly to global civilization. Stay woke, he says. Thank you for your
Yeah.
$9.99 super chat, bro. That's epic, epic words.
Legend Ned Large.
Definitely, definitely. I want to ask you. I'll ask you this. I want to close out on your work, your actual work, because we need to talk about that. And here we go. This is your reconstruction of Amenhotep, the third.
I've updated it slightly since then, but yeah, like, broadly speaking, it's yeah.
Okay, so if you want to, you can share your screen with us, and you can show us the updated version. But I instantly jived with the it took it connected with me, the eyes particularly, and the
Mm.
nose and the lips. So that all of that connected with me. Now, people have criticized you on your coloration. Some people have said it's too dark. These people are too dark. I agree they're black too, but this is too black. Um, bro, defend your work.
Um, I don't know. I don't feel the need to when people. Here's the thing, yeah. So we all know what we're gonna get from white supremacy. Let me tell you what we get from black people is a lot of the time we get people who want me to make something. And actually, I was going to do a live stream about this. I'm so glad you asked this question. You know, everybody wants me to make a certain type of black people, and they have to understand
Mm,
something. I'm not making a certain type of anything. I'm making something that looks like the artwork. Okay, the
mm,
artwork is my guide when it comes to this, and people don't realize. And I think a lot of people who make these comments, they don't understand African phenotypes. So you remember I said earlier, yeah, for instance, that Habesha people tend to have a small maxillary region. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
they tend to have a small, it's quite a thin maxillary region. So they'll that kind of like area just above their top lip will tend to be quite thin. This is a phenotype, okay? It's an expression of something that makes people look like something. Do you understand what I mean? So when people look, if someone comes up to you and goes, "Oh, you look Kenyan," or "You look this," or "You look that," there's a reason they're saying it. Do you understand what I mean? We're all black, but
Mm,
there's
mm,
something that they're calculating which
mm,
makes you look like a certain type of black person, and it's not your complexion. We know that already. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
So when you don't do art and reconstructions, and Nydia will kind of like double up with this as well, or any person who does reconstructions, when you don't do reconstructions, you don't understand what these differences are. Do you understand what I mean?
yes, I
You
do.
just think that, oh well, you know. So people come across to me and they'll be like, "Oh, make it look more Ethiopian," and I'm like, "So you want me to change his features?" No, just make him look more Ethiopian. No, no, no. I don't understand how you think I'm going to get there. Do you think if I make him more light skinned, he'll look more Ethiopian? Because I can tell you right now, he won't. Okay. There are certain things I have to do to make him look more Horn of African, but it will mean changing his features. So just having a look at the image we have on the screen. Yeah. This is, and if you want to, you can pull up his statue next to this because this is what I make the artwork from. The consistent things about Amenhotep III's statues, for instance, is that he has a wide face. Okay, he has a very quite strong and pronounced zygomatic region. Yeah, so you can
Yeah.
see his cheek. Can you see? So he's got these really sharp cheeks. These are consistencies he has throughout all of his statues. Yeah, he has quite relatively large and wide set eyes. Okay, so relatively large and relatively wide set. I've actually made them slightly narrower now than I did previously. Should I share my screen? Oh, you got to share my screen.
No, yeah. So I'll share your screen now.
Yeah. So relatively large and relatively wide set eyes. Okay. He has that nose, and you'll notice that I didn't dispute the nose. So even when you showed your finger, I was like, no, that nose is explicable. You just have to look at him through his different age ranges. So this one here shows a really young Amenhotep, and you can see a young Amenhotep here. Okay. This one here, you can see he's more kind of like mid 20s, and you can see it's the same person tracking through age. And if you can catch the right statue at the right age, and you could tell that this was a young Amenhotep because his head, his proportions are slightly different in terms of the size of his head in relation to his body. You could tell that he was about 14, 15 here. And lo and behold, you do the reconstruction and it kind of matches a 14, 15-year-old. Okay. You get an older, more portly Amenhotep III here. So you can see in the different ages and the different kind of like weight ranges, I'm approximating the same human being. I'm not changing him. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So I'm not changing him. I'm approximate. It's the same human being. By the way, I'm aging them up and down using AI, and that's it. So I've done one reconstruction here that I've changed the age using AI, and lo and behold, I'm pulling up his younger statue. You know, so I'm starting. This was the reconstruction that I kind of started with. This age over here. Yeah. I make him slightly older and fatter, and he looks like that statue. I make him younger, and he looks like that statue. Do you think that that's a a coincidence?
Mm.
You know, that doesn't happen, by the way. You know what I mean? Like, if these statues are random, or if I was picking features from random, then when I changed his age or changed his thingy, then he just wouldn't look like the younger statue. He'd look like something completely different. But he doesn't. It looks like and approximates to the same person, which gives validation to the reconstruction itself. Okay. So when people kind of like go, oh, well, he's too dark, or he's too light, or he's too this, or he's too that, it's like, I just build what I see. And his complexion here can be matched perfectly with the complexion of his artworks and his statues. I haven't picked a random complexion. Now, if you've got this thing in you, like a lot of black people do, there are a lot of people who are like, oh, make him look more Horn, make him look more Somali, oh, make him look more this, make him look more that. It's like, I'm not here to serve your kind of your
Places,
your own biases.
sorry to interrupt you. Places that all of these people, none of these people have been to themselves.
Exactly. You know what I mean? It's like exactly what you just said there. It's like you don't understand African phenotypic diversity. You don't understand it. If he was supposed to look, and I do have reconstructions that look more like, different parts of Africa, Horn of Africa, really dark ones, from Old Kingdom and stuff like that. But this is all just what the statues give me. I'm not here trying to make them look like something. I'm here making something that looks like the artworks, and this is the face that I'm presented with when I do that.
This is something that I've never seen. I think this is really what another thing that strikes me with your work, as compared to other reconstructionists. You actually go through the effort of showing these different these pharaohs in comparison with the statues as they age. People don't get that there are multiple statues of these pharaohs, and they vary in terms of as they age, with their different stages that they are in their life at that time. And whereas when you have people like Mr. Marias working, they present you a face that's supposed to represent the pharaoh's face throughout all of his life. Like even if you go with this cope that he was bald, fat, and whatever, like, okay, show me what he looked at like when he was like, a young, in the peak of his powers, because I'm pretty sure there are different statues and different representations of him as and when. So I mean, that's another problem that we could go into that I've kind of not asked you about, is that do these people even consult the artwork, or do they just make a show of, oh, I'm looking at the skeletons? I mean, and why would you not look at the statues or the artwork if that's their approach? I don't understand. Do they?
Yeah, no, they don't. And so they don't. That's the short and easy answer. Is that they don't look like the artwork. That's the bottom line. They don't look at it at all. You have to understand there's Egyptology was built on certain tropes. One of the tropes that Egyptology was built on was that ancient Egyptian artwork was not very good, and it was stylistic. Yeah. So two things they do is they insult it, first of all, and they also tell you it was all stylistic and it was all meaningless. So it was all mathematics and this, that. They weren't trying to make. And then you look at it, and then they go, and then occasionally they go, oh, apart from this statue, this is the first time the ancient Egyptians tried to produce something that was really realistic. This is some of their best work. Do you want to see some of their best work?
What is in their best work. Literally, go on, present it. I'm guessing, chat. I'm guessing we're gonna see something that that looks more like them.
This is according to Egyptology, thankfully dated Egyptology. This is the ancient Egyptians' best artistic work, the reserve heads. Yeah, and they'll say this. They'll say this is ultra realism.
Of course. Look at this.
This is the ancient Egyptians being ultra realistic.
Look at this phony job.
Does it even look human? Yeah, does it even look human? Looks like a friggin' beak. Yeah. Now the reserve heads, I'm convinced are fake. Egyptology is one of those set of fakes that Egyptology doesn't want to get rid of. They have a few of these, like Rahotep and Nofre, and they've got a few of these fakes that the Germans produced in a hurry. The Germans produced them all in the Cairo, all in the Giza plateau. The Germans produced a bunch of fakes in a hurry, dated them all to the Old Kingdom, and they were all like, "Yeah, these are genuine works." And the reserve heads are a bunch of ones that are still hanging around. Here's the funny thing about the reserve heads. Yeah. By the way, one of the reserve heads is sitting on top of a statue of Hemiunu at the moment. Have you seen that one?
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. So can you see why perhaps they call them the reserve heads?
Right.
Does that make sense? I.e., these are the heads that we keep spare when we need to knock a head off a statue. Notice that Hemiunu, the only person in the whole of ancient Egypt who Hemiunu looks like, is the reserve heads.
Of course.
There's a reason for that.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a reason why he doesn't look anything like any of the real ancient Egyptians. He just looks like a unique piece of artwork. When they found this statue, it had no head.
I've seen the original.
You've seen it, yeah. Headless statue. When they found this statue, it had no head, and by the time they were done with it, this is what it looked like. Suddenly had a reserve head. So all the reserve heads look like this. Just look like they've got a black man's shape up and a white man's face. That's just what they have. Go figure.
This is a sickness, bro. This is a sickness. Akmunu, thank you for your $10 super chat, $9.99 to be exact. I'm really grateful to you for that. Thank you, guys. Really, when you support us creators like this, it really means a lot. Thank you. Big ups to both of you.
Big up, man. Big up.
Keep up the good old work.
Keep supporting the channel, guys. Get some more donations coming Troll's way, man.
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's a sickness. It's all I can say is this is a sickness, man. I can't. You can okay. Just forget the instinctive reaction that this is obviously fake. Forget that. Let's play a game of logic. Why would the Egyptians? I'm guessing by reserve you mean heads that they weren't the finished article, but they kind of based their final article on. Why would they use reserve heads that look nothing? So why would they have had reserve heads that look one way, and then with the final finished work go for phenotypes and looks that look like Black Africans? Like, I don't understand. Why would they do that? Why would you say, okay, these are the reserve heads, they look clearly Caucasoid, but for the final piece, the pièce de résistance will present a Negro? Why? What's going on?
Well, here's the thing about reserve heads, which is hilarious. Yeah. So the reserve heads as this kind of like thing that Egyptologists continue to hold on to, but they can't fit them into the Egypt narrative. They don't fit anywhere. They're not referenced. They have no purpose. They know that ancient Egyptian artwork was monolithic, i.e. hewn from a single piece of stone. They didn't stick heads on. That's what Europeans did afterwards. Yeah. So they have nowhere to put them because they don't fit any protocol. When Egyptians did busts, they included the shoulders, head and shoulders. Okay, they cut a straight line across the shoulders. Just to have heads with no shoulders, no, is a complete and utter break of protocol. And for that reason, they don't fit anywhere in the Egyptological narrative, to the extent where the latest paper about the reserve heads basically says, and this is the only thing they could come up with. The latest paper says that the reserve heads might be the earliest example of basically voodoo dolls, literally. And this is the logic. They basically said that if you look at all of the reserve heads, they've all been damaged. So you can see how this ear is damaged on the side. All of the reserve heads, with the obviously the fakers hurriedly trying to make their modifications, show some kind of random damage, like this nose, which they decided was too big and they started sanding it down or whatever. And so Egyptologists have turned around and said they basically were the faces of enemies of the Egyptians, which they used to put curses on, and that's why they all have damage. Which is hilarious because there's two things. It's kind of like, now it's kind of like, well, that means essentially we're either saying A, they're fake, which is obviously what I'm going to stand on because they're fake, or B, they're foreigners. But either which way, they play no part in ancient Kemet. Okay, they play no part in ancient Kemet. These are not Kemetic people. Even the Egyptologists are having to admit that in order to make these stupid things fit their narrative, they're jumping through all kinds of hoops. It's absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, that's the reserve heads. They don't fit. They have no purpose. But yet, if you read through all early Egyptological books, they'll tell you that these are the most realistic pieces of art that came out of ancient Kemet. In fact, I even heard a black, these anti-black creators.
Yeah.
Yeah, bro, something podcast. That's all I'm gonna say. Those who know who I'm talking about. He was like, "Oh, look at the reserve heads. Oh my god. Oh, oh my god. Look at the reserve heads. They're amazing. Oh, these Afrocentrists. Oh, they can't cope with the reserve heads." And I'm just sitting there thinking, this guy's so dumb. He's so unbelievably dumb. He hasn't even done any research. He's just praising the reserve heads and hasn't done any research, because if he did, he wouldn't even pick them up. You idiot.
I didn't know about this reserves head thing. This is the first time I'm seeing this. I'm constantly amazed. I'm constantly amazed doing this at the length to which this hatred goes. It is pure hatred, and what's amazing to me is that it still exists. In fact, to me, a culture or a culture and a discipline that would go this far in 2025 to perpetuate this this lie has to be at its root rotten, has to be in fact more rotten than it ever was, because at least in the past it was brazen and honest. Now it's more insidious because it has enough self-awareness to know. It's one thing when you're brazen with your hatred, uh because that might imply in a lot of cases ignorance of what you're doing. But when you know enough to hide behind the veneer of professionality and neutrality,
Mm,
whilst you're still presenting these kind of mental gymnastics, then that speaks to something even much more toxic,
mm.
much more toxic. It's scary. I'm actually scared. I'm actually scared looking and listening to what you're saying, bro. Let's end on a positive note. Have you been surprised like by the success of um your work? Because I think some of your videos have done 1 million views or something on these reconstructions. I mean, at least anyway, in totality across TikTok and all the different socials that you're on, you've hit the millions in terms of impressions. So, did that surprise you? Has that surprised you at all?
Nah, if I'm going to be wrong, a bit disappointed. I'm being honest. Like, obviously, I know my shorts. have done very relatively well. Every now and then I still have a short that will go semi viral. But all in all, I know my channel's like completely suppressed now. So it's a little bit annoying, to be honest with you. I would like to be able to reach more people than the amount that I reach currently. So it's not, it's okay. You know, but you wanna reach as many people and not just preach to the choir, so to speak, you know, as
Yeah.
possible. I want people to see the work, you know. Good segue onto the fact as to why I'm releasing my book as well, you know, just to have more presence and more people aware of Africa's great and very obvious contributions as well. You know, that's really what is important. Like, people need to understand that we're not involved in a debate here, you know. We're not involved in a debate. They just need to know how weighty the evidence is in favor of, you know, the African origins of not just ancient Egypt but most civilizations. And when they're kind of like exposed to that information, I don't think there's any turning back once you know it, you know.
Bro, I wish you the best of luck. That's the first time you're hearing that, guys. I should imagine. I don't know if you've announced that on your channel before, but that you're releasing a book. Then you're putting all this in one place. I'm guessing, is that what you're saying?
Yes, indeed I am. Can I share a screen?
Yes,
Give me a
please.
second. Let me find it. Oh dear.
So, guys, this book's coming out very soon. Um, this is in terms of this is big because in terms of making sure, some of you have said in the chat they will destroy the Sphinx at some point. Looking at, I don't want to get this channel sort of shadow banned, but everyone's mentioning this now, so everyone's saying this name now, so it shouldn't draw the evil eye onto me. But Trump say a few years ago he was gonna bomb some of the most ancient places in the world and destroy.
Wow.
He literally said, we will destroy your, I think it was Syria, we will destroy your artifacts. He used that as a threat against Assad. But I mean, who says that at some point, if Egypt, modern day Egypt doesn't you know, follow the doesn't carry on doing its jigging and whatever, shocking and jiving, um they will level that place as well. And one of the things that will go is probably the Sphinx. So I can already, what I'm trying to say is I can see a plausible scenario whereby the Sphinx gets raised to the ground. And well, in reconstructing it, it will not look nothing like what it looks like now, because you can bet that for sure. Let me add this to stage.
Oh,
This
man.
though, this
That was
though,
very depressing news to
this though is a physical thing that you can have. So I've had someone in the chat say, you will need to use the donations to good effect. Well, I haven't seen. I see your name, your regular commenter. It was early on in the chat. We need to put the super chats to good use and get better computers. Well, right. Let's see you put your money where your mouth is. You know, um, this you can have physically in your hand. Nobody can take this off you. An EMP event cannot take this away from you. You have this in your hand. So I'll hand over to King to tell us what we're looking at here.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. So this is my book, Reconstructing Egypt, where I will be putting basically all of my learnings regarding the field of Reconstruction to good use. And obviously all of that kind of like anthropological data that we discuss so much on the channel. And the book was very much motivated by, you know, emails that I received requesting me to basically break down some of the stuff that I do on the channel. Like, oh, I love the fact that you go into X, Y, and Z on the channel, and can you recommend some books? I'm like, I can recommend some academic papers, and then I need you to read them, you know, carefully, because the person who actually wrote this paper is racist. So you have to read between the lines. And there's a lot. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? There's a lot to it. So a lot of that data that is probably more contemporary data than previous researchers had at their disposal, I felt just needed to be put into a single place. So that's what Reconstructing Egypt will do. It will also contain pretty much all of my reconstructions. I think it's going to be color. I'm not sure. That might depend on how well the pre-sale goes. But I'm going to try and hope that it will be a full color book as well, so that I can put, a good bulk of my reconstructions in there with the reference data, the reference material. And I just want it to be a really good book for people's library who are passionate about Black and African history. That's really, really what it is. So yeah, there it is. That's so you can. I need to reset that time time because it's not started yet. I think the pre-sale now. I did say I was going to start next weekend, and I think I'm actually taking a family holiday, and I don't think I want it to start until I get back. So it's going to launch in about 2.5 weeks now, the pre-sale. So I know I've pushed out a little bit. I did say I did want it to start this weekend. Last weekend initially, then this weekend I've decided no, let me push it out till I get back, and then when I get back I can just go full hell to leather and just try to get it out as much as possible. But yeah, so now that gives us about another couple of weeks. But if the only thing I ask for everyone, if they can go to that link that I put in, which is tkmedu.com, that's my website, /book launch, it will book-launch, it will take them to this page, and they can just click on the button here that says join the pre-sale, and it will just, once you go there, there's another button to join the pre-sale, and it will just register you in the, in fact, let me just take you through there now. It'll take you to the Kickstarter, and then you can just click on this notify me on launch. At the moment, I've only got 10 people who have done that, so it would be very appreciated if I could get more people to get that notification going, so that I know when I go live, it will, we'll kick off with a bit of a bang.
Guys,
But the book will be good.
I'll be getting this book. So you're saying, hit the pre-sale button now, yeah?
Yeah. So when it brings you here, hit this notify me on launch. I think it will just collect your email or something like that, but it will keep you in the loop. Once you have that, you'll be in the loop. Obviously, if you subscribe to me, I'll be on top of it on my channel as well.
Right, guys, this isn't even a freebie. You wouldn't be given a super chat here. This is something that I shouldn't have to sell this, family. This is something that you will be receiving a tangible benefit from. We always talk about why the world doesn't know about this information more. Imagine this book in every, I don't know, 85 plus thousand. I think you're on 85,000 subscribers now. On YouTube at least. Imagine this in the bookshelves of every single one of your subscribers, the King's Monologue subscribers, across TikTok, across Instagram, across YouTube. That's how we spread this knowledge. Not by clicking like on YouTube alone. That's great, but YouTube's not, when we don't own YouTube. You can own this book. This is his thing that he's putting out there. So guys, please do like me and go on and click onto that link that the King has provided. And this is how we restart the culture. This is how we take back our history, guys. This is it. This is actually it. I'm gonna say thank you, King, for joining me. Thank you everybody who's commented and bigged us up in the chat, and just for your insightful comments there, and taking part in this live. And also thank you for the super chats as well. Shout out to everyone who's donated tonight. I'm really grateful to you as well. Once again, thank you, King. This has been brilliant. Everyone, peace. I love you all. Coach to Compton, it's been Trill Black and your boy, the King's Monologue. Oh, we got a super chat. Come in quickly. I have to read this out because
Peace, Trill.
okay, let's have a look. This guy trying to keep us on for another hour or something, right? Right, King, Deshaun
My guy,
Williams.
Deshaun.
Sorry,
I said my guy, Deshaun.
Okay. Deshaun Willingham, $5 super chat. King, you should raise capital by listing the names of $50 or $100 donors on a page or two in the book. I'll be the first to donate. Yeah, that's an idea.
I do have that, but it's a bit pricier than that
Okay.
because of space.
Cool.
But you'll see once the pre-sale launches. Well, yeah, once the pre-sale launches, you'll see the kind of different options that I have in terms of if you want that. But even that, I've wanted to be as accessible as possible. So I think the initial price for the ebook is, I think, about £5 or something. The initial price for the ebook, so very cheap. If you don't want the physical copy, but obviously it kind of like cascades upwards depending on if you want a hard copy and so on and so forth. So yeah, you'll see when it goes live anyway, but there should be a tier for everyone to be able to have a version of the book in their collection.
All right. Very well done. Very well done, old boy. Like I said, it's been your boy True Black and the King's Monologue from Kush to Compton. Peace, everyone. See ya.
Thanks, my brother. Take care all.